Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Rob BRAAKE. Anyway, I'll let you pronounce your own surname because I'm sure I've messed that up. But welcome to the podcast, and you are the founder of Insight Matters, which is a fractional CFO and accounting for online business firm. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. And yeah, my family name, it's a disaster for non-Dutch speakers. So it's pronounced te BRAAKE.
Okay.
But don't worry, nobody got that right.
I love it. We were talking off air that you're currently living, I think you said, in the 8th country that you've ever lived in. And you said you're reasonably happy with where you are now in Lisbon, Portugal.
Yes, it's the 6th. And this is going to be home for 4 or 5 more years. And then we'll go somewhere else.
Wow. So true digital nomad with the occasional set of roots going down. I know exactly how you feel. My third country, living in Mexico currently, and barring something strange happening, we love living here. We've actually bought a house here, and we do love the Latin countries. For us have been amazing, and the more traditional culture has been incredible. The weather, the food, the lifestyle, the culture, the cost of living, just everything here for us is just it's a good blend of all the things that are important to us in our life, with the side benefit of very easy access to the United States for travel, for business, for conferences, for meeting with clients, etc. We all optimize for different things in our life, don't we? But as entrepreneurs, we are also trying to optimize our business life, not only necessarily to make money in the short term, but also to figure out how to make money in the long term without necessarily having to slave our guts out till the day we die. So I think that's some of the things that we'll talk about today. But how did you get into this industry to begin with? What about providing these types of services specifically to online brands excited you and sucked you in?
Okay. I'll take a step back. My educational background is in finance. I have a master's in finance and a master's in strategy. Started working in a bank. They sent me to China, spent a couple months in the project there. Then the bank told me to go back to the Netherlands, and I thought it was a really bad idea. So as any sane person would do, I quit my job, and I figured if I want to stay in China, I'll have to do it on my own. Started a company there with a founder, did that for 7 years, realized that it was surviving, but not the hockey stick we were looking for. So I decided to step out of that. And then you're in China, I have to build another business. And I wanted something that was remote because my family's getting older. At that point, I spent 7 years in China. I loved it, but who knows how long I want to stay there. So I started working as a fractional CFO for a company of a friend of mine. That added another one. That led to another one. And before I knew it, I accidentally built a business. The key thing here is that on the CFO side, I got so insanely frustrated with data quality from management accounting, from management reporting, that I figured I can't do anything on the CFO side if I don't trust the numbers. And that's the moment when it shifted from me as an independent fractional CFO to building a business that can actually take the whole finance chain. I like to joke that accounting is too important to leave it to the accountants. So I figured somebody on the business side needs to own that, needs to run that, so that it's actually useful. And the online part is very pragmatic. I wanted to work remote. I want to be able to move to another country every couple of years. So then clients that have a similar mindset is a very obvious fit.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And certainly I've been working in e-commerce in one way, shape, or form for over 25 years, but certainly when I first started out in the industry, it wasn't with the view of, oh, hey, cool, if I go into e-commerce, then I can work remotely. That kind of wasn't, 25 years ago, that wasn't really a thing. And certainly we didn't talk about it in that way. But the happy upside of that is that in e-commerce, we can literally work from anywhere. We can take clients from anywhere. We can sell online from anywhere. It's shipped to anywhere. So certainly that is a happy upside of having chosen to work in the e-commerce space. So I totally agree with you there, especially for those of us that are digital nomads. We love traveling to different places. We love working from different places. We love living in different places, exploring the world, seeing the world through other people's eyes. For us, this is a very happy place to be, no question about it. But when you are consulting to the businesses that you consult with, are there usually, do you see 1, 2, 3 things that leap out at you that almost always guarantee that these businesses will be successful? Do they have certain character traits as a business or as a leader or as a founder that is going to help ensure that they will be successful no matter what? And then one sort of secondary corollary to that question is, do most of those founders that are ultimately successful, do they generally start out with a view of, hey, I'm building this thing to sell, so I need to put systems and processes in place that will make it sellable right from day one? Or is this something that kind of comes to them as an epiphany at some point where you come in and you help them get ready to sell?
So let's take a small step back. The first question is, how does that entrepreneur, how does that owner define success? For some people, that is making 10K a month and living in Thailand or whatever beach town.
Yeah.
That is, by their definition, perfectly successful. Others define it as, I want a 8-figure exit. You have a completely different business and a completely different style and completely different characters. I think what stands out for me is the people that are most successful in achieving their goal are the ones that are very clear in what they want to achieve and know the price they have to pay to get there. If you want a lifestyle business on Thailand, on the Thai beach, you're not gonna make millions a year.
Yeah.
There are probably exceptions, but in general, you don't.
Yes.
If you want an 8-figure exit, you're not gonna have a 9-to-5 work week for the first couple of years. Again,
No.
there are exceptions, but in general, it is a lot of hard work and a lot of risk.
Yes.
So the ones that are deliberate on what are trying to optimize for, what are the steps that I'm having to take to get there, those are more likely to get there. Now, if I look at the clients where we come in and help them, it's typically because something is going wrong. If everything goes according to plan, everything is stable, nobody switches accountants because of that. Nobody pulls in a CFO because everything is so nice and steady. So people come to us when things are either going really well and they are afraid they're on a rocket and they don't know how to control it, or things are going really bad and things need to be turned around.
Wow. And when you come in for the very first time, on occasion, especially if there's a turnaround on the cards or if things are burning and there's a fire, I'm guessing that you feel, at least in the first month or two, you probably feel like a little bit of a forensic accountant, meaning that, geez, let's figure out like what's our baseline. Oftentimes, I'm guessing the books are a mess. I'm guessing that the accounting is a mess. I'm guessing sometimes that their taxes are a mess and they haven't paid taxes in years. I'm guessing that in a turnaround scenario, you really have to spend the bulk of your time figuring out where the business is even at right now. What is the reality? Because oftentimes as owners,
Yeah.
we have to be somewhat delusional, because otherwise we wouldn't do what we do. We wouldn't take on the
Yeah.
risk of entrepreneurship. We have a delusional belief that we're perhaps better at some things even than we are. We have a delusional belief that we can turn any business around. We have a delusional belief that we can figure it out no matter what that it is, so that we can help our businesses be successful. But when it comes to hard facts, facts are your friend, right? And so when it comes to the real to hard truth of the numbers of the business, I'm guessing that is a huge lift in some cases, especially depending on, like, we have almost two types of founders usually. We have the visionaries, we have the operators, and so sometimes we have people that are into the minutia of the books, the numbers, the day-to-day transactions, our COGS, our unit economics, our retained earnings, all that sort of stuff. Some people are really on top of that stuff because they love it and they totally geek out on that stuff. Other founders, especially if they don't have a co-founder who's into that, then all that stuff can be seen as a distraction from the marketing, product innovation, service innovation they want to be doing every day that excites them and gets them up. And that can sometimes leave things in a very big mess from a back office perspective.
Yes.
Do you see that too?
Oh, yes. I just realized when you talk about who are the ones that are actually successful, the ones that are actively aware of their blind spots and are searching for help. It could be marketing, could be whatever, but the ones that are actively aware of the things that the known unknowns, they are step one. And the ones that are actively aware that there are unknown unknowns, they go even further, but they are running the risk of becoming paranoid because everything might be uncertain and unsecure. So that kind of tends to paralyze a little bit. Yeah, I think the most people we work with are really solid on marketing or product or both or operations.
Yes.
They come to us, they actively know finance is my weak spot. I know it's important. I need somebody I trust to get this resolved. And then they engage with us or somebody else. I like to think we are better. That is actually, they're actively pulling the knowledge, they're actively pulling the insights so that they can make the better decisions.
And one of the things you said to me that really stood out before we started recording was you said, look, preparing a business for a life-changing exit starts 2 to 4 years before you hire a broker or you put it on the market or you put it on flippa.com or something like that. Whenever you go to sell a business, if you haven't been prepping that business for sale specifically for 2 to 4 years before you go to sale, then you're probably not going to extract perhaps the multiple that you think you're going to extract. You perhaps are simply not going to be able to sell it as fast as you think you should be able to sell it. And you perhaps may not find the ideal buyer if you are not planning well in advance for the sale of a business. What did you mean by that when you said that specific thing?
So if you're selling a story because you know the business, you know every in and out and every nook, every cranny. A buyer doesn't. They have the information you give them and their assessment of it. So you're telling a story. And if you're only telling the story, like in the past we made this revenue or this profit, you're going to get a multiple of that. It's a nice exit. But if your business is growing, you want to get a multiple based on the forward-looking growth, on the forecasted profit. But I can now make a business plan for my business and say, we're going to triple our profit next year. But there's no confidence in that. There's no evidence that that plan is worth trusting. So if you make a plan now for the next 5 years and you execute on that for 2 years, and for 2 years you hit your targets, you say we're going to hit 30% growth and you hit 28, 32, whatever, somewhere near your target. And you have it, those documents are timestamped, right? There's an edit date. And the second year you hit that target as well. Then you go to a buyer and say, look, this is what we've done. This is where we're heading. If you want to buy this business, you're going to pay a multiple of that because this is what we are confidently saying that's possible. And we have shown in the last 2 years that we can build that growth. So all of a sudden, that forward-looking plan has a lot more credibility because you've delivered on that plan so far. So that's why you want to start 2 to 4 years in advance to build up the credibility in the time that you tell the story, that you can actually point to the plans, the documents, the progress, the reports. Everything shows this is the engine, this is why it runs, and this is why it's worth more.
And beyond being able to hit some target based on some real data, what are some of the things in the market that a potential buyer is looking for? Is it very well documented and cemented processes? Is it really good, really well integrated, deeply integrated tech stack, ERP, accounting platform, ecom platform, meaning that it's unlikely that they would need to come in and spend 6+ figures to re-platform any significant system within the first 18 months of buying the business? Is it that they have the right people in the right seat so that they don't have to immediately think about org design and hiring new people? And what are some of the key factors beyond the numbers, beyond the pure revenue and profit numbers, that influence a buyer's willingness to buy at the multiple that the seller is looking to achieve?
We break that down into two components. You have hygiene factors. They're not adding a lot of value. Like having clean books is a must-have. But you're not going to get an extra high multiple because you have super clean books. Good books are key, but you're not getting more for just having it even better. The right person in the right seat, documented processes, legal stuff in order, tax stuff in order. All of those are hygiene factors. The story of how your acquisition can scale, that is, and your plans going forward, that is really where the multiplier difference is made. Tech stack, I've never heard a deal bounce because they didn't like the tech stack.
Wow, interesting.
I've seen people getting a lower multiple because the tech stack is outdated, but I've not seen a deal bounce because of that. Have
Wow.
you?
Okay. So it's not a deal breaker, but it could be negotiating leverage for the buyer.
If the buyer thinks they have to invest 200K in a text improvement, they're going to deduct it from the purchase price. If the
Yes.
business is itself is solid, you're going to pay for that rollout that they're going to execute.
Makes sense. So based on what you just said, it sounds like if we have confidence in our business, if we have confidence in our growth rate, if we have confidence that for the next 2 to 4 years we're going to be able to hit our numbers, and I know that I'm embarking on this process that within 2 to 4 years I'd like to have sold the business, then it feels like that you're potentially better off doing some of those improvements, those technical improvements to the business. You're probably better off taking those on in preparation for sale, especially if it's 2 to 4 years out, because the reality is a significant tech stack upgrade is going to take somewhere between 9 and 12 months for most businesses. And it feels like taking that on a little bit earlier is probably going to make it easier to get that business ready for sale. And as you say, it's probably not necessarily a deal breaker, but certainly it's going to make it even more attractive. And you're probably going to be able to hit those multiples easier than if you don't bite that off and take that responsibility on.
Now, one issue that typically comes up there is I want to maximize my profit, so I don't want to make that investment now. That makes sense. But in reality, if you container the investment you're doing in that upgrade, you take it out of your P&L and you put it on the balance sheet, or you put it in a specific line.
Yes.
It doesn't impact the valuation in a negative way.
Amazing. Amazing. And what are some of the key traits of the deals that you've seen come unstuck, get derailed? Multiples are a fraction of what the founder or the owner expects them to be. What are 1, 2, 3 attributes of those businesses that caused the deal to either unwind completely or cause them to be in a place where, I don't know, maybe it would have made sense for the owner or the founder to persevere for another 2 to 4 years beyond that point, instead of having what I would, even if it's not a total fire sale, maybe it's a slightly distressed asset in the sense that, because some founders, if they've put 4, 5, 6, 10 years into a business and it feels like it's turned into a grind and they just can't see a way out of the grind, sometimes the way out of the grind is, okay, let me sell it to somebody younger, maybe a little bit more creative, maybe somebody who's a little bit more tech savvy than me, maybe somebody who's a little more number savvy than me, and they can take this business that I've bled, I've sweated, I've cried over this business for a decade, and I've taken it to where I think I can realistically take this business without killing myself. So now it's time to hand it off to someone else with a different set of skills to me to take it to its next level of growth. What are some key attributes of those businesses that cause those deals to be a real challenge to execute?
The number one thing, and that I see why deals fail, is trust breaks down. The story that the buyer stops believing the story that you're telling them. Could be financial, could be other things, could be you're throwing up a smokescreen about how amazing your team is, even though they're actually not that great. Anything that you say that the buyer thinks, I don't really trust that, starts to erode the trust. And the second trust starts to crack, then the likelihood of the deal failing is much higher.
I think you just described a marriage. I think you just that's pretty much what it sounds like.
In a way, yeah. In a way it is. If there's dirty laundry in the business, be transparent about it. You don't have to put a spotlight on it, but disclose it upfront, transparent. Because if you disclose the bad stuff, they're going to dig. They're not going to find any other bad stuff. They're going to trust that's all the bad stuff. We had a client that was selling his business, and they had a very specific, non-standard way of measuring retention for reasons that was in their business legit. But if you just pull the data from their systems, retention looked completely different than how they defined it. So what they've done is very upfront communicate. This is our retention number. This is how we define it, and this is why we define it like this. Buyer goes in, sees the numbers, thinks, what the hell? Looks at the documents. Reruns the calculations. Everything adds up. okay, we disagree with it, but no trust harmed. And
Yeah.
they had a conversation, like the buyer has his own opinion about it, that's all fine, but it confirms the trust. If the buyer has to ask, why do these numbers don't add up? You're already 1-0 behind.
Yeah, and I guess that makes perfect sense because the reality is that businesses, especially businesses that are operating in novel niches or they're taking a novel approach to the industry, which is why they perhaps have been disruptive to the industry, then those businesses are probably going to require even more explanation than businesses operating in a traditional vertical, operating in a traditional way, but maybe they have just managed to scale or reach escape velocity in some other way. If it's a very well understood model, business model, and everything about it is well understood, then probably not a lot of explanation is required. But I guess the more novel or unique what you do is, the more explanation and transparency is going to be required to help a potential buyer understand what it is that makes you unique.
Yes, and at the same time, even in e-commerce, if it's Amazon subscriptions or if it's Shopify subscriptions, if you define your AOV or your LTV or your retention in a way because different than standard, because that fits your particular product or your vertical better, it's all fine. Transparent and proactive about it.
I love that. I love that. And what are you seeing out there since, especially since COVID? Now, I saw valuations of e-commerce businesses absolutely explode during the COVID era. In fact, many startups in the e-commerce space only survived through COVID because of the ridiculous explosion in TAM during COVID. Government enforced, the government had a gun to most of our heads and forced us to do a lot more shopping online during COVID than what we probably would have otherwise. And as a result of that, it caused a scenario where a lot of businesses that were run very shoddily, very sloppily by people that perhaps weren't very experienced, weren't very good, weren't very good operators. They were what I like to call peacetime generals, right? Meaning that if you couldn't make money online during COVID, you probably had no business being in business online. And you certainly probably had no business owning a business of any kind if you couldn't be successful during COVID. Now we're post-COVID, right? And things have returned to the mean. And yes, e-commerce growth is still up and to the right, but it certainly was that blip. If we were to draw a straight line from a year before COVID and a year after COVID, and we were to draw a trend line, taking out the COVID bump, we're back on trend for growth. That massive bump, it wasn't like the bump stayed there and then continued up and to the right. It returned back to earth. Now, have you seen that affect valuation, purchase criteria, duration of the negotiation cycle? Have you seen that have a material impact on the e-commerce market for businesses because of that? I don't want to call it crashing back down to earth, but crashing back down to reality is probably a better term for it. Have you seen it materially impact the work that you do with online businesses today?
Yes. Although I'm not 100% sure if it's because the post-COVID slump, I got to conclude, I have the impression that it's much more driven by higher interest rates, higher cost of capital, so therefore much less willingness to purchase very risky assets like e-commerce businesses. So we've seen multiples go down. I think we see it picking up again, both in transaction volume and in multiples, but it's nowhere near 2021.
And you're not just prepping these businesses to sell in every instance. Sometimes you are brought in to help them know their numbers, control their numbers. I'm guessing that it's not just an accounting and tax prep service. I'm guessing that oftentimes these business owners who maybe don't have a financial background, they're going, look, we know there are ways we could optimize our business from a financial performance perspective, but we don't know what that looks like. We don't know what our CapEx should be. We don't know what our OpEx should be based on our numbers. We don't know what our gross margin needs to be to hit the net margin that we need to have in our business. We don't understand maybe even the difference between dollar margin versus percentage margin, because you might have a great percentage margin, but if your ASP is so low, that translates into a super low dollar margin. Unless you're doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year in some instances, it don't matter what your percentage margin is. So sometimes these business owners, they are so out of touch with the raw numbers and what that means for their business and what that means in terms of trying to be able to plan their growth and roadmap their growth out and the capital needs that are gonna be there in 6, 12, 18 months time based on inflation and based on other factors, based on cost of capital, based on access to capital, based on all sorts of other things. Sometimes they don't know what they don't know. And it's those unknowns, the unknown unknowns that are the ones that will bite you in the ass the hardest. And so when you come in, is it oftentimes that they're going, we need someone with a level of financial acumen we'll probably never have internally to be able to help us plot a growth plan that is aggressive yet achievable within the performance of the business. And sometimes it's crazy because sometimes I talk to these business owners and they say, hey, we're going to double our revenue next year. And they say, we think we can do that. And then I'll say that one of the first questions is, what led you to that? What led you to that conclusion? Was it based on a trend line, a high-low trend line, based on the peaks and troughs of the business over the last 5 years? And so you're saying, okay, cool, this is a stretch, but we think it's doable based on our upper level trend line, or based on acquisition, or based on what was it that gave you the idea that you could double your business over the next 12, 24, 36 months, whatever it is. And oftentimes it's, we have a feeling that we can do this. We think we can do this. And we're focusing everyone on that because if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. And for me, it's always a struggle to accept that. And for me, it's always a struggle to hear that when it's not grounded through my lens in any form of reality and any form of even ambitious reality. It just doesn't line up with anything they've done historically. And I like to think, look, if they've been in business for 50 years, because I'm dealing almost exclusively in the B2B world now, manufacturers and distributors. So most of the business I deal with, they're not startups. They're 50, 100, sometimes 150-year-old family businesses run by second, third, fourth generation after the founders. And I like to say, look, in the last 50 years, if you've never doubled your revenue from one year to the next, if that's never happened in the history of your business, the likelihood of you being able to do that from this year to the next is pretty low.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack there. One small correction, we don't do tax. We're full management side, full business side.
Okay.
Tax,
Love
we
it.
work with weird setups, international setups. We're not touching tax. It's different skill set. The irony is, if you run a business in that 4 years to prepare to sell, that's exactly the same roadmap you're going to take to build it in a way that you can scale it and hold it without worrying. It's almost, I know it's a dirty word, it's almost a little bit corporate in running it with a very strict planning and execution discipline. If somebody comes to me and says, hey, I plan to double next year, I have a similar reaction to you. My first question is, what's the plan? How do you plan to do that? And then the finance side is, show me the budget. If I see your revenue double, but your marketing spend stays flat, sorry, I'm not buying it. How do you think you're going to double your conversion rate magically? Probably there are cases where that happened, but I don't think I've seen them too many. So the whole financial discipline that me and my team would run is, what's your plan? Let's build the numbers in that. What is the targets that you want to hit? And you talk revenue. I always get very nervous if people aim for certain revenue goals because revenue is vanity.
Yes.
But what's your operating margin? What's your operating profit or the gross profit? What are you targeting? And let's work back from that. What does that look like? What results do you have to achieve? And what actions do you have to take to actually hit that? If you're going to triple your marketing spend, sure. I think it's somewhat realistic to double your revenue. Can your margins hold that double marketing spend? Because it's going to take a ramp-up time. What does it mean for your supply chain? Can you actually afford to bring the inventory in? Just dreaming of doubling your revenue, I know it sounds very nice.
Sexy.
But especially in e-commerce, the cash flow implication of it can be really bad. We have a client that has a 120-day lead time. They sell in Australia, they buy in Europe. If they miss their sales forecast, if their sales forecast is wrong, they're screwed. If they overstate their sales expectations, they're going to have a lot of lost inventory. It's very seasonal. So they're going to have inventory dead in the warehouse for 6 to 9 months until the next peak season. If they order too little, they have a 120-day lead time. There's no way they can add more. So the whole planning process of what do you plan to do, how do you plan to do that, and what does it take in terms of marketing, in terms of supply chain, in terms of working capital, all of it has to be in the same plan. Because you have a fixed amount of marketing dollars. You have a fixed amount of dollars that you can only allocate to marketing, supply chain, dividends, whatever. If there's not a coherent plan, I'm not buying it.
And how often do you come in and that these businesses, they would benefit from some additional tooling, some basic tooling that would help them gain insights into the financial performance of their business or their website? There's a plethora. If you log in and you just go to the Shopify App Store, for example, and you type in analytics software, there's like 500 results, from Store Hero to I've featured probably 100 different, maybe not 100, maybe 80 different analytics platforms that plug into Shopify on this very podcast. Some focus on COGS, some focus on net revenue retention, some focus on customer acquisition, some focus on attribution and figuring out the right attribution model that actually matches where your customers are coming from and helping you to understand your acquisition cost, helping you to better understand your AOV, helping you to better understand your CLV, because some people struggle to calculate CLV because they don't really know how to do that just by jumping into Google Analytics. And so a tool that can plug in and pull that data out and just spit a number out at them. Sometimes if it's a tool that's only going to cost them $50 a month or $100 a month, sometimes those tools can be very helpful for business owners and founders that maybe aren't steeped in the numbers and aren't Excel gurus. Sometimes it's hard for them to get to their numbers easily and quickly on a rolling basis without the help of some of these third-party tools that can help them arrive at those numbers faster and easier and more accurately and more consistently. Do you sometimes recommend those tools, or do you say, look, let's get to the raw numbers. Let's figure out how these raw numbers have come about. Let me do the Excel work for you because you're not an Excel guru. You're not a numbers guru, but I am. So I'm going to take the raw numbers out of your QuickBooks or your Xero or your NetSuite or whatever it is. I'm going to crunch the numbers. I'm going to create the formulas for you. And then I'm going to hand those over to you. We're going to plug those into those systems so that we can get those numbers for you quickly and easily. I guess what I'm asking is there a silver bullet out there of tooling that can help these business owners develop financial acumen faster, I guess is the question.
There's no silver bullet. There's a lot of good analytic tools. So there's marketing analytics, the tracking, the allocating, the cost of acquisition. That is very operational. You should never ask a CFO to go too deep in that because there's a gray zone where it overlaps. The pure marketing side, tools should be really good. The only asterisk, and I don't have a clear preference for any of them, the only very big asterisk there is data quality matters. So where we often see it wrong is in cost of goods sold, the landed cost. Shopify tells you have this gross margin, but nobody updated the Shopify cost of goods sold in the last 3 years. So if the data quality there is solid, the tools on everything marketing is really good. How to then but you can still drown in the amount of data there, especially if you have more SKUs, multiple channels, it's still very easy to drown. So then what we do is on a monthly basis, take a step back and on a slightly higher level, look at what's your revenue gross margin per channel? What's your gross margin per product group? Where are you ahead or behind schedule? And that is harder for the tools to tell you in a way that is actually still comprehensible. And that's where I think it gets more financial, and on a daily basis, it's more operational, and that's much more marketing. So yeah, on that side, please do use tools. Don't pay a consultant hourly or even a retainer to do Excel work if there's tools that can do it for $50 a month.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And how long after you start working with these founders, leaders, acquirers of these businesses, because I'm guessing that sometimes when a business is freshly acquired, that's a great time for you to come in and help these new owners find the growth levers in the business and the financial levers in the business that maybe the old owner didn't use or didn't leverage. How long is it before? Is it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? How long does it usually take for those leaders of these businesses to really start to trust their numbers, start to be able to trust the forecast, start to be able to make some more strategic investments that they can have confidence that's going to pan out, or a high level? There's no such thing as 100% confidence in anything. But how long is it usually after you start working with someone that they all of a sudden start to breathe again and they go, oh, okay, maybe I'm not an expert in my numbers, but I know enough now about my numbers to give me confidence that they're accurate, and that if I work with you, for example, to put together a growth forecast and a growth plan over the next
Yeah.
6 to 12 months, that we have a pretty good chance of probably hitting those numbers.
Yeah.
How long does that take, and what are some key facets that drive that level of confidence?
So we typically start with a 30-day discovery project where we jump in and we figure out what's the objective, what are the metrics that really matter for you, what should the finance setup be, what's the quality of the books, can you pull the right information from there to get that, and usually there's a delta, what's the plan to sort that. If the books are in good shape and it's just a little bit of refining, within 30 days, the books are reliable. We might want to fine tune a little bit, polish a bit, but then there's confidence on that part. If the books are a mess, cleaning that up is going to take more time. The forecasting part is where it gets interesting, because everybody thinks, or everybody would like to make a forecast and then immediately trust it. I have never seen anybody make a forecast that hasn't consistently done so before and come up with reliable numbers. The first time you're going to be off by 20, 30, 50, 500%. And that is frustrating, but that's okay and normal. The key thing is the evaluation step then after that first month. We were off 60%. Why were we off? Was it a conversion rate? Was it the cost per click? Was it the AOV? Was it which facet? Where were the differences coming from? And then update the forecast. And then the second month, you're going to be closer. The third month, you're going to be even closer. And that's why that whole 4 or 5 year plan comes in. In the beginning, you're off by quite a bit, but you should get more and more accurate over time. Is there a magic bullet like it's 30 days or 60 days? No. I do see that the level of confidence of, okay, we have a plan and we evaluate why we were wrong, that structure in itself gives confidence, even if the numbers itself are still off.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. And I realize that obviously you're focusing primarily on the financials, but in my experience, most of the time, an advisor, a business advisor, a growth advisor, someone who comes in with a really clear focus on the numbers of the business, oftentimes their role expands over time to where they become a trusted confidant. They become almost like a business partner in the sense that they're going, hey, we got 2 ways we could go with this. Both are probably viable. Both will probably achieve a great outcome. But what would you recommend we do based on your knowledge of our business? You've been working with us for 6 months. You've been working with us for 12 months. Which one is the one that, based on how we do things, is probably the best way for us to go? I feel, because entrepreneurship it can be so lonely at times. And so sometimes just having a peer, a respected peer in the business who doesn't have a direct financial stake apart from getting paid as a service provider. They don't have a direct stake in the business. They don't own shares in the business, but having someone who is less emotionally invested in the outcome of the business. Sometimes just having someone with that level of pure clarity is something that is almost invaluable. It's hard to put a price and a value on that type of strategic advice. And there's a big difference between, I know what you do, and something like one of the MBB consultancies is going to do. It's a very different thing. And to them, they're so friggin' big, that you're really just a number to them. And sure, they've assigned a team to you and someone to work with your business, but that they're almost too far at arm's length from your business and too far from the success of your business mattering to them, living or dying. They're almost too far. So I feel like having someone like you in the business is that perfect happy medium. You're not an owner, you're not a shareholder, but you're also not so friggin' big to where whether they live or die is totally immaterial to you. So do you find that these entrepreneurs that you work with, that they start to lean on you more over time for general business advice than just, hey, can you help us with our numbers and help us make sure we're financially sound?
Yes, but to be honest, anything that's out of my wheelhouse, I'll give my opinion, but I'll also tell them for this, especially with legal or tax,
Yes.
I will happily refer them elsewhere. But yeah, you build up a long-term trusted relation. We grow with them. We understand what they want to achieve, where that discussion, where the decision fits in their context. And I think that the longer we work with them, the deeper we get, the easier those conversations get.
So in other words, you can be positively disruptive the longer you work with someone.
Yes. And ironically, it takes less words to get there. The longer you work together, in the beginning, you need to explain a lot on why I think this thing might be a good idea or why the other one might be better. I have one client, he just sends me something and says, I know you're going to say no to this. And all I have to say is, yeah, you're right. That's a bad idea. Don't do it. But there's trust. There's a long-term relation. They know we are incentivized to look out for them because we want that trust, that long-term trust.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that makes complete sense. And certainly I've seen this be the case before. And I think it's easy to drink your own Kool-Aid as an advisor. And I have to be cautious of this myself. Because I've seen a lot in 25 years of this industry, but I ain't seen it all. And I certainly don't have a monopoly on good ideas. I certainly don't have a monopoly on the perfect tech stack. I don't have a monopoly on anything in terms of the best way to do things. I don't have a monopoly on that. But what I do have is, I guess I have enough anecdotes from experiences in the past to be able to tie threads together in a way that's hard for someone I'm oftentimes working with founders or leaders of a business that have been in their role for 28 plus years. And so if it's been so long since you've had exposure to any other business model, any other tech stack other than your own, it starts to feel like you're a fish in a fishbowl, and it's hard to get perspective when I'm dealing with different businesses every single day. And so I'm the breadth. Maybe I don't have quite the depth that they do in their business, but what I do have is breadth. And what I do have is such a diverse set of experiences and categories and verticals and regions of the world. And I just think that the breadth of experience matters when you're giving advice. But to your point, I think it's also, on the flip side of that, easy to start thinking we do know it all. And even if we don't actively think that, subconsciously we start to think, oh, I've seen that before. Oh, I've seen that before. Oh, I've seen something similar to that before, and I know how to help with this. But sometimes it's more about where is the business at in their maturity curve than it is knowing the perfect answer and the perfect outcome. It's about how can I help them get a good outcome based on where they're at in their maturity curve.
And especially if the people are in that seat for that long, how can you build a relation with them so that they trust you that they need to change something that makes them very uncomfortable? Because if they've been in that seat for so long, they know their customers, their systems so well, and you're coming in and telling them, maybe we should change this, that trust barrier is critical.
Yeah, because they're going, you don't know me. You don't know our business. You don't know our industry. You've been here 2 seconds. How the hell would you know what we need to do?
Yeah.
And so there is that tension at times, because very rarely am I, like you said it right at the beginning of this conversation. If everything's going perfectly inside a business, they don't need me. They don't bring me in unless they recognize that there is either a problem in the business or there's an opportunity they have no idea how to exploit. If there's not one of those two scenarios, they're not going to be calling me. And so I'm called in oftentimes when something in the business is on fire and, okay, God, we need to fix this and we need to fix it pronto. Or, hey, and I'll just give you one scenario and maybe you can respond with a scenario that you find yourself in that mirrors this. B2B businesses historically, they've done person-to-person selling, right? That's the way it's been done. Sales reps going out, meeting with customers, knocking on doors, going to ball games, boozy lunches on a Friday, all that sort of stuff. That's the way B2B selling's been done. COVID upended that. Now there's a lot more online selling, but still, based on the data, 40 to 60% of B2B manufacturers and distributors in the US don't do e-commerce. Still, to this day. 98% of retail businesses offer e-commerce, okay? So it's wild how far behind the B2B world is, probably 5 to 10 years behind where the retail world is, and that's normal. But even within that cohort that offers self-service e-commerce, they might not offer EDI ordering. They might not offer punch-out based ordering. They might not order some of the integrated ordering methodologies that are very common in the B2B world. And they might not be able to go after a certain contract, for example, with a government will oftentimes say, okay, for this tender, If you can't sell to us via EDI, where we can generate a purchase order inside of our government system, send it to your system electronically, and you process that, or we're not going to have somebody log into your e-commerce platform and place an order. That's not how this works. We're going to generate an automatic order, and you can either receive it electronically and process it electronically. Otherwise, you can't even tender for this contract. Sometimes they see an opportunity in the market, but they don't know how to go after it, right? They're going, we think we could win here. We think we got the pricing. We think we got the product. We think we've got the fulfillment capability, but we don't know how to service this customer digitally the way that they expect it to. And I'm guessing that there are some times when you're brought in an opportunity that somebody sees and they go, we think this is a great opportunity. We think we can achieve it financially, and we think we can deliver on it from a product and fulfillment perspective. But man, we need a second set of eyes on this, because there might be blind spots here that we just cannot see. And before we rush headlong into this, what looks like a golden opportunity, what seems like a dream, it might just be a nightmare, and they want you to call it out if it's going to be a nightmare for them. Is that some of the scenarios you find yourself into?
Yes, not too often, but if we do, it's often M&A related. Again,
Right.
Either buying or selling, or new service launches, new product launches. Not so much, we have yellow coffee cups and now we want to add red ones, but more we're in the pet space and we want to expand into the coffee space. Like, it's a completely greenfield for them.
Yes.
That's when those conversations come, because that is a lot of investment, a lot of capital requirements, a lot of insecurity. That's where people get uncertain. If it's incremental changes, they're fine. Either they really are fine or they think they're fine. Sometimes that's different. Only if it's really big swings, that's when we get those kind of questions.
When they're swinging for the fences, and it's potentially an existential risk type of scenario.
Yes. If they're wrong, I won't curse.
Screwed.
If they're wrong, they mess up really bad. They're screwed.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I got it.
Yeah.
Now, an hour is just about flown by here. It's been a fantastic conversation. If you could snap your fingers, if you had a magic wand or some pixie dust, some fairy dust, and you could sprinkle it on the e-commerce industry and change one thing about it overnight, what would it be?
Oh man, I don't even know where to start in that case. I would argue that the industry is growing up and it needs to go faster. It was cowboys doing everything shady under the moon, black hat tactics, illegal products, everything shady. And it's ruining the reputation for all of us. So leveling up, becoming lighter gray. Nobody wants to be completely white. That makes business impossible.
Yes.
Becoming lighter gray, more controlled. And I know it sounds like cursing, but almost a little more corporate. Just
Yes.
in
Treating
how we do
their business with the
how we do with
respect
our
it
supply
deserves.
team. Exactly. And the beauty of that is, if people do that, they can fire themselves and go surfing and have some CEO run it. They can sell it. They can keep running it as a CEO. It opens up all the opportunities. Less cowboys.
Optionality, which is what most entrepreneurs want. They want optionality in their life. That's why they started doing what they're doing, right? So I absolutely love that. And they can optimize for that optionality if they grow up and become a little bit more mature in the way they operate. Couldn't agree more. Now, what's the best way to get a hold of you? I'll drop a link into your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, as well as your website in the show notes. Other than that, what's the best way to reach out to you if people want to talk all things e-commerce, optimization, getting business ready for sale, etc.?
It's either LinkedIn or connectrob.com. That's the easiest one. And if people want to do like a self-assessment on how good the finance function in their team is, in their company is, we have a 2-minute self-assessment scorecard. You can fill out if your accounting is solid, if your planning and forecasting is solid, or if it's all a burning flame of horse poo. I'll share the link as well. We can add it to the show notes. That simple self-assessment gives you a bit of a clue of if and where to focus on the finance part.
I love it. I love it. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me any question that you like. It could be personal or professional. So, Rob, and I'm not even going to say your surname because I'll butcher it, from Insight Matters, what is your question for me today?
I'm going to take the easy road here. If you have that stardust, and not on the e-commerce space, because that, I think we're pretty aligned, in the B2B space, what would you change there?
Yeah, look, I would probably force the retirement of anyone over the age of 60 in the B2B space.
Why?
Because unfortunately, what we are seeing is the evolution of the buy side of B2B e-commerce, or just B2B commerce full stop. It doesn't have to be specifically the e-commerce channel. We are seeing the buy side evolution happen at a much more rapid pace than the sell side, meaning that Forrester came out with some research at the end of 2024 that showed that right now, today, over 70% of the B2B buyers in the United States are millennials or Gen Z, meaning that they are 100% digital natives. We have more diversity on the buy side now. We have more females on the buy side. We have more minorities on the buy side. We just have so much more diversity on the buy side today. And on the flip side, fortunately, in some respects, we have the age, probably the average age on the sell side is
Interesting.
probably 50 in my experience. And that's great in the sense that they have deep knowledge of their product. They have deep knowledge of their industry. They have deep knowledge of the kind of needs that their customers have. But unfortunately, the downside of that is that they are oftentimes totally resistant to digital channels because they see them as a massive threat to their livelihood and their commission. And so I see leadership in these businesses, which are oftentimes boards on these B2B businesses. They're 60, 70, 80 plus years old. And again, that's great from an experience perspective, but
Yeah.
not so great when you need to adapt ultra rapidly to radically changing buyer expectations, and very soon. Because if we look at Jagger, Coupa, Ariba, any of the major e-procurement platforms that are out there in the industry, they are rushing headlong at agentic procurement. Now, if a B2B seller today doesn't do self-service e-commerce, doesn't do EDI, doesn't do punch out, they have an ERP and they got a field sales team, and that's it, man, they've already missed out on the digital boat massively already. What's going to happen when agentic procurement becomes the norm, which is I think of it as EDI 2.0? They have none of the digital foundation in place. So that's why we're seeing accelerated M&A activity in the B2B world, because the gap between leading edge manufacturers and distributors from a tech perspective is growing so fast versus the laggards that the M&A activity is massive right now in the B2B world. It's only going to accelerate. We're even seeing it in the SI space, in the platform vendor space, and even the investor space with B2B. We're seeing consolidation there. And it's because the gap between the leaders and the laggards is growing so fast that it's creating an arbitrage opportunity for the leaders to take out the laggards for very cheap. And all of a sudden now they can infuse them with a digital DNA that they've never had before and make them way more efficient, allow them to go after completely new opportunities of business and channels at very low cost. And so that's what I would, and again, I'm 51, so I'm rapidly approaching that age whereby I would normally kick myself out of the industry, but I like to think I'm a little more caught up to speed with where the industry's at.
Okay. To make sure that you don't shoot yourself in the foot in 9 years from now, can we change it into making sure that people over 60 are still able to change? We're just firing them and chucking them out, because we're going to have massive labor shortages in that case later on. So,
Yes.
And I hope by the time I'm 60, I'm still neuroplastic enough to actually keep learning and developing.
Yes. I would 100% agree with that. And I just, unfortunately, I don't see, sure, in the tech industry, we have lots of people over 60 that are geniuses, that in entrepreneurship in general. I think B2B specifically, manufacturing and distribution, is where old school thinking still dominates. And that's the thing that scares me, is that has to change. And we need to infuse the entire B2B industry with a whole new level of curiosity about what's coming next, because AI is actually going to disrupt B2B before it disrupts B2C and D2C.
Yeah.
That's 100% clear.
Yeah. But ironically, them not adapting is at the same time an amazing opportunity for a lot of entrepreneurs, because if you can deliver sales better, faster than the in-house sales teams can, that's a really interesting business model.
Yeah, and I'm all about giving salespeople superpowers. So for me, I'm a massive advocate for sales teams. Massive advocate. I'm just not an advocate for doing sales the old-fashioned way that you've always done it. I'm about, because what I discovered in the consulting that I do is that between 20 and 60% of a sales rep's time is spent on zero value add admin tasks. And so the problem with that is that it feels like momentum. It feels like business is getting done. It feels like people are being productive with busy work, but they're actually not. When you look under the bonnet, it's not adding value for them and it's not adding value for their customers. So I'm all about how can we automate the crap that is pure admin tasks, completely automate that so that you can focus on knocking on more doors, going out to more boozy lunches, building more relationships, making stronger relationships, landing and expanding, asking more questions. Okay, cool. We sell you this stuff today, but did you know we also have all this stuff? Oh, by the way, even if you want stuff that we don't yet sell, we would look at procuring those for you if the opportunity is significant, right? How can we work together in a more holistic way? And so I am all about making sure that sales teams are totally empowered to do what they do best, which is building relationships and not doing shitty admin tasks. And so if you're an elderly salesperson out there and you're 70 years old and you know your industry inside and out, that doesn't mean that you're dead. It doesn't mean that you can't learn new things. It doesn't mean that you can't learn new technology. You 100% can. And I, like you, my hope is when I'm 70, that I'm just as hungry and I'm just as curious about new technology as I am today at 51. Because I'm certainly just as curious about new technology today as I was 25 years ago when I entered this industry. Like I haven't changed in that regard, and I'm 51. Age is just a number, but I see that particularly in the B2B world, there is this deference and reverence for the old school way of doing things to the detriment of kind of almost everything else. And that is probably what I'd like to change.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think I agree. I understand. I'm not disagreeing with you. It probably has a reason that we're working more with digital savvy, digital native, and less with old school B2B, because the way we're set up remote, that in itself is already a massive blocker for a culture fit on with that.
It's a good filter, isn't it? It's a great filter.
Yes.
Listen, Rob, this has been a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate your wisdom. We'll get this out there. We'll get all your links into the show notes there. You can send me that link for the assessment that you were talking about. Thank you so much for your time, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Thank you so much. If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.